Hello and welcome to this short talk on leading deliberately, which is actually the name of my third book. And we're going to look at how potentially leadership theories have been looking at the wrong thing for about 70 years. Such hubris. First of all then, so development isn't a ladder. It's an expansion of awareness across the same context or the same structure, okay? Notice the diagram. It's not going up, it's going across. And we're often taught in university, starting with the great man theory, that there's a bunch of theories, a bunch of labels about what leadership is or ought to be. And we'll come on to why I think they're a little bit... Well, the problem isn't that their theories they're just describing behaviours. They're not really explaining how or why leaders think the way they do in the first place. And this is what leading deliberately will do. So what's the hidden variable? It's actually cognitive complexity. Now, I'm not the first person to talk about this. People like Otto Lasky, Robert Keegan, Elliot Jacks have talked about this kind of thing. But let's look at it from a CDT perspective. And I often show this slide when I'm teaching this at master's level in my university. Notice, please pause the slide here, if the video, and you can see that we teach, for example, we teach as if transformational leadership is available to everybody, and it's not. I think there's another video on this on YouTube now if you want to check it out. Now, something interesting, we all know a terrible boss, or we all know how the boss that we don't like behaves. But notice they're not necessarily bad people, it's just that they're stuck at their own level of thinking, which impacts how they lead. And we know from other research and also my first book that this is how a dynamic leader, highly intelligent, highly dynamic leader thinks. They're capable of seeing the big picture. They adapt to change easily. That kind of thing. You can see it all here. So let's go through a scenario where we look at the same problem but at different levels of thinking. This is a simplified ladder. We're just going to go through this, and I'm going to suggest that you guys know somebody already who says to you, you know what? Don't worry about it. Just follow the process. That will make sure you do a good job. And then you know somebody who would say to you, well, what system created this? So let's have a look at a scenario right now. So you are a team leader. Your team has spent 3 months working on a project for a major client. 2 days before the presentation, the client emails you and says, you know what, we're not very happy. Can we make some major changes, please? How do you respond? Let's look at, first of all, how AQ4 responds. And what they do is they say, well, they're looking for blame. They're saying, well, who messed up here? Whose fault is this? Where are the mistakes? Can we look at the mistakes a bit more? Okay, maybe we need to check processes. And the focus is really on control and correctness, as if there's a right way of doing things or a correct way, AQ4. But with AQ5, they're saying, well, let's talk about what happened. Okay, there's a push to maintain harmony. There's team discussion, there's reassurance. It's not your fault, don't worry. There's emotional support if necessary. And then there's consensus building. You know what, we'd have all done that in the same situation. Don't worry about it. Do you think they're effective as managers? Now, AQ6, there's a shift in thinking. The typical response here would be, well, what in our processes produced this outcome? Okay, so they moved away from the human being. Now they're starting to look at the way things are done within the organization. They analyze the workflow, they identify systems failure, and they adjust processes so that it doesn't happen again next time. And this is a bit more of a systemic way of thinking about it. Well, if that's AQ6, then AQ7 now, the leader questions the larger system. Why are we structured in a way that produces these problems? So they're challenging organizational assumptions, they're redesigning strategy, and they're changing how work is organized, which is a much more strategic architecture. Notice the difference between this and blame. Of course you do. Finally, the leader at AQ8 sees the construction of the situation itself. Their typical response would be, well, what assumptions are we making about this client, about the project, and about what success actually means? Okay, so maybe they're capable of reframing the situation, and they explore alternative possibilities, shifting perspective, because we know that multiple perspectives are the best way to grow our thinking. And they've got a much more meta awareness. Notice that the situation didn't change. Only the leader's thinking changed, okay? So which level do you think organizations operate at? AQ 8, 7, 6, 5, 4? It might depend on the organization itself. but where are the decisions made that then shape that organization? So what I want you to take away from this is the fact that it's not, leadership failure isn't usually caused by bad intentions. It's caused by insufficient awareness on behalf of the leader. Okay? So thank you for that. This is the first book. Please do check it out on Amazon or any other retailer that you wish, and get in touch if you want to discuss leading deliberately. There's my website. Many thanks.